But look at the numbers. How come depression, anxiety is increasing? Why is it only increasing exponentially? So more medicine, yet more depression. More doctors, more of this secular understanding of psychology, psychiatry, yet still more depression. Question is again, why? I go back to what I said, and I stand by what I said, that the modern day paradigm has failed us. And Muslims need to wake up.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Incisive Thoughts, and today we have something very special. Today we have another speaker who is none other than Gabriel Al Romaani, an Islamic counselor and psychologist. Gabriel Romaani is a dedicated and compassionate Islamic counselor and psychologist renowned for his expertise in integrating psychological principles with Islamic teachings with a profound understanding of both mental health and Islamic jurisprudence. Gabriel provides holistic support to individuals and families, helping them navigate life's challenges. Holding advanced degrees in psychology and Islamic studies, Gabriel has a rich academic background that underpins his practice. So let's not wait longer. Let's call him on stage. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
So how are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, barakallahu fiqh.
So today, I think the first question that comes to my mind, is what is Western what is Islamic psychology and what is Western psychology, and how are they two different?
Okay, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, psychology as a whole is to an extent, a man-made science. It was more organic at the beginning because the objective of the psychology at the beginning was the study of the soul. People were trying to understand the soul. But yeah, so the study of the soul, that's what it was concerned with, because as society advanced, if we can see linearly, we see that society has progressively become more materialistic. So at the beginning, because there was not so much materialism, people are more organic, people are more in touch with nature. As society progressed, you can see it linearly over history towards a more materialistic paradigm. While before they were more organic, more in touch with nature, people were more spiritual. Whatever religion, people had a concept and a connection to a higher being, to the creator, be them Christian, Jews, whatever. But we see as society progressed that people have become more and more materialistic, more and more atheistic. And in doing so, not only the study of psychology, which comes from psychos, logos, the study of the soul, but many other sciences have become material-centric, dunya-centric, right? They went away from studying the soul and tried to understand the soul, meaning spirituality, a human's connection to the higher power, to God, to studying the chemical imbalances or traumas or anything that is basic cause and effect. And in doing so, they've abandoned the main objective. So today, modern psychology is focused mostly on understanding balances, imbalances in the body, trauma, external influences, and why the body, the mind suffers, and how
Maybe they're also focused on neurotransmitters, like all the time they just talk about serotonin reduction and stuff like that, dopamine.
Well, that's what it is, right? So it's basically everything. I'm trying to keep the terminology easy for everyone to understand, but it's basically balances, chemical balances and imbalances, right? It's basically the body is connected through different pathways, neural pathways, and these neural pathways connect, and they have signals, and basically they want to focus on understanding where the imbalances are, and they want to compensate for that through medicine, which is another form. Obviously, it's a material thing, right? So drugs medicine, all types of medicine, all sorts of medicine. Big pharma is a huge, huge thing in the 21st century. It is reported that many, I don't, we can pull out a number, but I cannot remember it off my head, but it's a very, very big number of Americans and Westerners in general are reliant upon SSRIs, or for to explain to people, basically antidepressants, medicine
Serotonin reuptake inhibitors, something.
inhibitors. Yes.
Yeah.
So these tablets, what they do is they basically aim to correct what these psychologists or psychiatrists believe is an imbalance within this neural pathway. And according to them, if you do that enough, then you could basically reestablish that normality. Okay. And that normality, again, is focused towards what? They don't look at sadness or trauma or problems in your life as a overall bigger problem. They look at it as the lack of happiness or being able to enjoy your life and being able to, again, maximize the material use, go shopping, go vacations, and enjoy these things, which will inevitably only condition you to do more. For example, if you enjoy shopping, you enjoy watching stuff, you enjoy going out, you enjoy spending money, you're only going to do more of that. And that is the objective of the society, is to get people to be as hedonistic as possible, because we're a materialistic society, and that only connects back to us being a consumer society, spending, consuming, not producing, consuming. There are producers, but those are usually benefiting from the, let's say, 95% of the consumers. So that's kind of how it is. It basically encourages, and people want to make sure that you feel good enough to be able to go back to these things. Now, if you don't, then at least you'll be somehow hooked on to these medicine, to alcohol, to certain vices such as pornography or sexual vices or whatever, in order to fill those voids that are there. So that's kind of like, I know a lot of people would have a lot of problems with this explanation of modern psychology, but I challenge people to not just listen to a video of mine or anyone else's. I challenge them to just do a bit of research themselves, right? Because I'm sure there can be a more qualified people than my person than myself come in and be like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to talk to us, talk some very heavy words and very heavy meanings and look very academic, and people will be like, oh, okay, this person knows more. But that's another fundamental flaw of modern science, that has become a religion where people just believe in it when they don't check it. They don't use their brain, they don't make research. They just say, oh, this guy sounded really intellectual, he is Dr. so and so, right? Therefore I believe him. So I challenge people to be a bit more academic and do a bit more research in understanding modern day science and psychology, and why it has failed us as humans. And I'm going to repeat that. It has failed us. Now, there are benefits, no doubt. No doubt. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there's also some benefit in alcohol and in gambling. In the first few verses that were revealed, in the gradual making haram of these vices, Allah said that there's some benefit and some harm, but the harm outweighs the benefit. So no doubt there's benefit in many things. And yes, there's benefit in science. There's benefit in us using right now this stream that's only done through science, and there's been advancements in medicine. The issue is that that's not what we're fighting against. What we're fighting is that there's no moral compass or moral bounds that are revealed from the divine, who knows us best, to actually condition or limit the usage or the development of these sciences. And in doing so, people have gone to even the extent of cloning and creating, or trying to play God, trying to transplant wombs into men, to impregnate men, all kinds of horrible things that go against the principles of humanity. They've done that. Now, on the other side, the Islamic paradigm is just that. It's basically you have leeway to research, to develop, right? People would think that, well, the Muslims, they're just using sticks and stones and trying to still, deal with, with, making fire in the Stone Age, right? That's all we're not, we're just backwards people, primitive. No, that's not true. Muslims have been some of the greatest contributors to the advancement of science and, and research. But there's a moral paradigm that restricts us, and that is that God is at the center of everything. So Islamic psychology is God-centric, is spiritual-centric. It focuses on the soul. Islamic psychology is basically just Islam. If it's not another science that someone has come up with, we're just using terminology. And I really don't like to use big words because people get caught up in big words and slogans and terminology. The bottom line is Islam deals with a person's feelings and emotions and spirit, and is a cure, okay? And it is a cure for what is in their hearts. What does Allah say? وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And the Quran is a healing. Why? Is it just because we recite Rukia? Yes, indeed. We believe that there's a spiritual healing in just listening to the Quran. Now, of course, your typical average secular person, even maybe a Muslim, they'll say, what is this? You listen to Quran and you get healed, shifa, all these ruqyas, these imams and these Maulvi sabs, they just do these things, right? Well, I think you're jumping the gun because there's lots of research, for example, but of course they're not going to deny that research. They're going to be very acceptable of that. For example, the therapeutical effects of music. Okay, there's lots of studies on that. So what is it? Now, of course, for us, music is haram for many reasons. I'm not going to get into that. But first of all, starting with probably the words that are used today by the common musician and rappers, starting with B and F and S and everything is, from all that, and all about vices and doing this and doing that.
Hedonistic and
Very, and not just that, just encouraging violence and
right
encouraging dishonor and
capitalism.
encouraging just horrible things, right? So I'm sure that no one would have an argument against that. But see, people deny that the Quran is healing by hearing, but they'll say, yeah, classical music, when you listen to it, there's studies that the brain waves and this and that, and no. Well, what's the Quran? The Quran is a beautiful recitation, right? And even if you don't understand it, it's still a healing for you because these are the words that are calming. Of course, for us, we have a Aqidah element that we believe in it, right? But it is definitely something that people need to consider.
Yeah,
But not to mention,
I myself have gone, like, experienced, benefits of Rukia myself. I can testify it myself. Many people that I have come across, when they actually have practiced Rukia, they have seen so many things within them, like, they have seen changes within them. So it does work, definitely.
100%. Not to mention the meaning and the guidance, the directives of the Quran. Because the deen, what did the Prophet say? Ad-deenu nasiha. This deen is counseling, it's advice. And the Quran, it tells you, it counsels you, right? There's a cognitive process that takes place. There's a CBT, let's say, cognitive behavior therapy. It tells you to understand something, i.e., iman, aqidah, knowledge, and then it requires a change in behavior, right? So it's like a CBT process. You comprehend and understand what Allah is telling you. Don't do this, do that, be good here, do this here. And your body starts now behaving in a different way because you've internalized that knowledge, that information, and now the output is a certain behavior change, right? So that's where Islamic psychology or Islam comes in to target the soul. It's trauma, sadness, anger, depression. All these are actually, they're just symptoms of the soul being hurt. It's not the body.
Right.
Well, why? I'm reading through this book right now, and I recommend it to people to read. Daniel G. Amin, right? It's called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. Okay, so I'm reading through right now, and it's New York Times bestseller. Of course, if I say that now, people are gonna believe it, right? You see the, right? So we have to use the kuffar sometimes to make our point, but that's just because that's how people have been restricted by science. Anything that comes from a faith-based or God-centric base, nah. But if some doctor from New York's, Times bestseller says so, then okay, we will believe. It's kind of like, you get these news that University of whatever discovered that fasting twice a week, helps you against dementia and schizophrenia, right? And then the Muslims like, yeah, wow, Islam is confirmed now. I
Yeah.
believe because the Prophet ﷺ used to fast twice, right? It's like we need them to confirm for us to believe.
Yeah.
And this is
And
like
then everyone will share this on WhatsApp and put that on their
exactly, wow,
story.
Islam is the truth because this university, I cannot remember which university, but this is actually a correct thing. It's a true thing. Um, I think it's somewhere near New York or New Jersey. There's one of the universities there that came up with a study that fasting twice a week helps fight
Yeah.
dementia and schizophrenia. Anyway, back to my point. So he's challenging. He's obviously a MD. He is a psychologist, psychiatrist, and he's written a lot of books. But he's come up with a concept that basically scans your brain. So he's a clinical neuroscientist, psychiatrist, brain imaging expert. So he's developed this brain imaging uh, device, and he's basically, it's called SPECT. Okay, and basically what he's done and what he's challenged modern psychiatry on, he said that if you're sick, you're gonna go, and the first thing a doctor's gonna do is give you a blood test, and he's gonna analyze your blood, and he's gonna do all kinds of tests. He said psychiatry is the only science that for many, many years, you're talking about centuries, it was always self-diagnosis. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, how do you feel? And the person says, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I can't sleep, I can't this. So the doctor say, okay, he is depressed, right? No test. It's just the basic interview examination. Might be some testing. Recently, it's become a bit more, let's say, evidence-based. But for a long time, and even currently, there's you're not going to look at anything. They haven't looked at anything. They don't test you. So the challenge is to actually look at the brain and look at the body and analyze and test and see, not just self-diagnosis. And I mean, you might have a pain in your arm and you'll go on Google and you look, I have a pain in my arm, and you get like, okay, you're dying or something like that. You've seen people already self-diagnosing from Google. But my point is that we need to open up our minds and our hearts to understand that. And in this book, I mean, he is a Christian. You can tell that he is faith-based because he talks about the different paradigms here uh, on page, and I really recommend it. Okay, on page 44, he talks about the four circles that you need to explore when dealing with mental health, and the four circles are biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. Right,
Hmm.
so he has a spiritual component because a lot of people are suffering spiritually.
Hmm.
Socially, someone cheated on them. Someone, like yesterday, I was looking at some things to buy something, and in one day I just went to see two guys about a certain product, and both guys were depressed, telling me that their wives left them. And you can tell because I was like, how you doing? And as soon as I asked, how you doing and why you selling this product, they're like, yeah, my wife left me, so I need to like clear up some of these debts and so on. Both guys, their wives left them, so they have a social trauma,
Hmm.
right? Not to mention the spiritual trauma. And I was saying to my son, I said, you know what the problem is with these guys? I said, they don't believe in Allah. I said, this is it. They're not able to compensate for that social imbalance through faith and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
Right.
right?
And then no matter how much of antidepressants or other things they take, that void is still going to be there. And
That's it.
modern psychology is not going to help to
Exactly.
address that void.
100%. So modern psychology would look only at the biological maybe process, right? It will ignore the social, the spiritual, the emotional, it'll ignore all those. It'll focus on one only. And they're going to target that, but there might not be anything wrong with them. The biological uh, I guess, outcomes or symptoms are due to the social or emotional or spiritual problem because they're
Right.
connected. But they're targeting the wrong thing, right? And in doing so, well, do your research and see the side effects of some of these medicine. So now you're causing more problems as opposed to solving it. So if the medicine doesn't work after a year, more medicine, different medicine, up the medicine. And that's why I tell my clients when they go to psychiatrists, always ask your doctor to give you an exit strategy. How long? When? How do we do it? They don't do it. They just tell you got to do it. Come back to me. Not to mention that they love to build a big clientele. You know, they're charging some crazy money. And a lot of these psychiatrists and psychologists have an ongoing clientele base that obviously writes their checks, right? They have to have a clientele. People go to counselors for 20 years, man. 20 years.
And in fact, they have
Modern
so
day.
many. In fact, I've seen there are so many clients that they can't even address the human being there, like where they are actually involved in actually the healing process. Like, okay, next, 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 you get prescribed, and
100%.
then next.
100%. 100%. Because it's just, okay, let me see, 5 minutes, charge you whatever, $200. I'll look at you. So how do you feel? I'm depressed. I'm sad. I'm feeling anxious. I have some anxiety here. I have some palpitations. Okay, depressed. Looking at the whatever manual of statistical, whatever they call it. I hate that thing. And then they're like, okay, this medicine, prescription, go. Now you're druggy, right? If you look at some of these drugs, I'm not sure why the ulama are not looking into it to make some of these things haram, right? To really look, because of course it was very easy to label marijuana as haram when it became legal in America and Canada. I think I don't know where you're at right now, but in the UK it's still illegal. But in America and Canada, you can smoke weed, man. You can. There's so many shops. You just walk out, just down the street from me. There's many shops, and everyone talks about medicinal, medicinal. Even the Muslims are smoking it, right? Now, of course, it's haram because it is a muskir. It is an intoxicant.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you that a lot of these medicine are intoxicants as well. Now, the ulama need to maybe up their game and start looking at some of these things because so many brothers and sisters are addicted to this medicine and they're destroying themselves. They are killing themselves slowly.
In fact, I have heard that there are some medicines like some SSRI, selective
Selective
serotonin
serotonin
reuptake
reuptake
inhibitors.
inhibitors.
They have like permanent damage on your libido and other things which you cannot recover once you've taken them for a long period of
Yeah,
time.
not just libido, on your brain.
Yeah.
On your brain. It needs, but again, going back to the difference between Islamic paradigm and modern paradigm, the modern paradigm, because it has legislation behind it, it's got the goal. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. So they make the rules. And even people are coming from traditional spiritual backgrounds in addressing the soul. Now, a lot of these people have also qualifications in the secular paradigm. But of course, they don't want that because there's a huge economic incentive. Huge. You're talking about just search big pharma to have these legislations and who is allowed to practice and who is not allowed to practice. For example, you cannot. I deal with so many homosexual clients. Now, in general, if I would be licensed in a specific state or this and that, I could lose my license, right? Because why? There's been legislation against it. In certain states, like I think Texas, for example, it's still allowed. It depends on which legislative party rules. But this is it. They limit you, and whoever has the gold, whoever has the money, who has the leadership, they will make the rules,
Right.
right? So that's like the main difference.
Yeah. And then like just summarizing what you said. So in fact, modern psychology is only addressing the kind of biological aspects of it, and they might just be symptoms, there might be something more deeper that they are not looking into it. Whereas when we come to Islamic psychology, as far as I know, in fact, the first mental hospital was actually through made by Muslims. Like they had created the first mental hospital, which was, so Islamic psychology is more holistic in nature. It addresses all these aspects, and you can also address the biological aspect. It's not that we are denying the biological aspect. In some cases it can be necessary, but but generally speaking, what I like, what I have seen you addressing and what I myself see is that, generally Muslims now, because they've been so infected with this kind of modern mindset, they have this bifurcation where, okay, modern medicine or or like, what modernity gives you, like, is completely different. What Islamic spirituality tells you about these aspects of the soul, and there are other entities, etc., which can have a causal effect, possibly. They just read that away. So what do you think, like, do Muslims, they do have this kind of bifurcation, and they don't understand that they can be causally connected, or they can be one and the same thing?
Right. So,
Like for example, let me give you an example. Like for example, we believe that, okay, we human beings have a soul that is not materialistic in nature, that is something immaterial. But at the same time, we believe that there are other immaterial aspects like souls, like jinns, for example, which can influence us, which have an impact on our well-being. So how would you address that?
right. So, if you look at the Islamic paradigm, it takes in consideration the fact that these things exist,
Right.
right? Uh, the spirits, angels, the consequence of sins, for example, the consequence of the corruption of society, moving away from God. All these things exist within the Islamic paradigm. In the non-Islamic paradigm, the secular paradigm, it doesn't exist.
Mm.
So, who runs education? It is the secular paradigm. Now, Muslims go through education, all of us, in these countries, and we get conditioned to believe certain things. Islam is something that is part of a cultural identity for most people. Yes, I'm Muslim, but I don't really believe that I need to do this or that. Or yes, I am Muslim, but I mean, science is what I go through. Yes, I am Muslim, but Shifa and Rukia will be the last thing that I'll do. First, I'll
Mm.
pop my head with aspirin and Panadol and Tramadol and this and that. Then, if ever nothing it works, I'll say, "Oh Allah, please help me." Right? So that's kind of like the way we look at things, because we've been trained and conditioned through our educational system to be focused on the materialistic paradigm and not the spiritual one. So we've all gone through it. We see Islam through the modern day lenses, not the modern day Islamic lenses. And this is the problem. We flipped things. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ said towards the day of judgment. Things will be flipped. Okay? Truth will be lies, lies will be truth, things will be flipped. And that's what it is right now. Most people, I mean, I'm going to stand by what I say. 20 years into Islam, really studying human behavior and psychology. And I would say I stand by what I say. In general, most people, there's still, of course, exceptions. And as the Prophet ﷺ says in Hadith, there will always be a group of my ummah who will call to truth. But in general, most people are seeing Islam through the lenses of modernism. Okay, and you can see it based on the even our dawah encounters and the videos and the way people, even imams and da'is, have been positioning. Everything has to be politically correct. Everything has to be some scientific explanation that we're trying to give for everything, right? Even things of the
Right.
unseen, books about, yeah, because this number, and if you do that many times, and this is a scientific miracle, woohoo, Allahu Akbar, right? And then when it gets dissected properly by an intellectual, it starts causing doubts, because these people have been lying and manipulating and doing some mental gymnastics to publish their books and their so-called scientific miracles. Now, I'm not saying there's
Right.
no miracles in the Quran, but this whole scientific miracle thing, there's a lot of mental
Yeah.
gymnastics that's been,
In
really
fact, in fact, the last discussion I had was with Hamza Zorzis, and we went through this whole topic, and he addressed, because he's doing his PhD thesis on this topic itself.
you know what
So,
I'm
inshallah,
saying?
any
So
viewers want to go through that, I will inshallah add the link in the description, inshallah.
beautiful.
So,
So the Muslim, that's the problem. That's why we're seeing things the way we're seeing. And Muslims are not willing to now address the issues at hand,
Yeah.
And that's why they're suffering. That's why so much depression, anxiety. Actually, if you look at it, let's say rationally, right? Now we've advanced so much when it comes to medicine, antidepressants, availability of that, doctors, prescriptions, therapies, all kinds of stuff. It's all over, especially with media connecting the world. There's just so much, right? But look at the numbers. How come depression, anxiety is increasing? Why is it only increasing exponentially? So
Right.
more medicine, yet more depression. More doctors, more of this secular understanding of psychology, psychiatry, yet still more depression. Question is again, why? I go back to what I said, and I stand by what I said, that the modern day paradigm has failed us, and Muslims need to wake up. And it's because, as you said, they don't target the problem. There is a deeper problem. Our souls are bruised. We're suffering inside. It's not here necessarily. It's not the chemicals. It's here. We're suffering because we're not connected
Okay.
to Allah.
So like when we talk about some aspects which modern psychology is myopic and it cannot even understand, is something like, for example, remembrance of Allah, zikr, which is something that impacts our soul, something that other as rukia, which is like, for example, if we have already been affected by something, rukia is like more like a cure, a recovery. And then for zikr can also be a sort of protection. And at the same time, like we, like, how would Islam explain, like, because our viewers might not know, how can jinns actually affect us, or like, have a causal relationship with the mental health issues that we go through? How can that be the case according
Right.
to
So
Islam?
there's 3 points here to address. Number one is the dhikr in remembrance of Allah without understanding. Okay. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'inul qulub. Right? This is one parameter. So can you actually have any effect if you make dhikr, you repeat a certain word, let's say, this many times, like Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, okay, or Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar after Salah 33 times, right? Why numbers? Why this? Why that? Of course, it has. Just repeating something, the process of repetition, the process of saying something many times, is again, sorry to use again modern day paradigms, but people, they only believe if you do that. Uh, yes, repetition of things, it's conditioning process. Listening to something can have positive aspects and impacts on you. So dhikr, recitation, reciting the Quran, even if you don't understand, it has a healing. And of course, there's a faith based understanding as well here, that we know that these are the words of Allah, so it heals you. That's number
Right.
one. Number two, of course, it is extremely important to understand, and Islam always focuses on understanding, right? When you understand the Quran and even the dhikr and what this dhikr means, you will find that your brain comprehends a certain deep understanding of the realities of life, of existence, of suffering, of challenges, of tests, and so on. And then you internalize that there's a cognitive process. You
Yeah.
understand, you rationalize the stories of the prophets, why they've had to go through so much suffering. Understanding that, that's what dhikr is. The Quran is dhikr. But the Quran is
Right.
just not a bunch of words put together to be repeated
Right.
many
Right.
times. It has deep meaning.
Right.
And that's why Allah says throughout, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you not understand? وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. If we would have just listened and understood, we would have not entered the fire, right?
Yeah.
So there's a concept of a process of cognition, which again affects behavior, because I understand this, I listen, I hear, I understand. Now I'm not going to do certain things, right? You go on the street, the board says 50 miles or 40 or 30. I hear it, I see it, I understand it. I'm not going to speed because there's consequences to me doing that. Easier said than done, I understand. But this is the process.
Yeah.
This is
and
the
and
process.
then and then I believe with zikr is also like the polish of the heart, spiritual heart. Like, if
Mhm.
a person who's sinning a lot, our, like, soul gets to some extent like clouded or rusty, and then zikr is going to polish that, it's going to rejuvenate our purpose, etc., etc. So that is also an impact. And I, I myself have, once that I started doing zikr every day, it changed my perspective, changed many things in my life, it changed my well-being. So that is something I truly recommend people to do. In fact, there's a very good article by Dr. Nasir Khan. I'm going to add that in the description. Read about zikr because it addresses the issue. uh,
100%.
Now, regarding Rukia, you then we talk
Right.
about Rukia. So what is Rukia, and
Right.
how is,
Right.
going
So
to brief on it?
the third point that I was going to mention is the concept what you mentioned, shaitan. Like, how does the shaitan or this
Okay.
spiritual being, this unseen thing, affect us? Now, to a lot of people, that's what it's just, asatirul awwaleen. These are just stories and just fables and blah blah. So they dismiss it.
Right.
But you see, one of the greatest tricks of shaitan is to make people think that he doesn't exist, that he's just some kind of movie actor, and then funny, scary movies, whatever. And in doing so, he's able to move more stealth and able to influence people more and more. I always go back to the hadith of and the shaitan that he is in the bloodstream of the son of Adam, kamajri dam. It flows like the flow of blood. I
Right.
think that's a very deep hadith to be analyzed because we understand how many hormones get transported to our body and how it influences our well-being, blood flow, and how the brain blood barrier and how it influences your mind. And Islamically, we first and foremost always accept the ayat and hadith literally. That's the first principle. Okay, you can look at figurative speech later, but first and foremost, it is literal. I personally believe that's a very strong hadith, looking at what the world knows today, and that in a way that this is from the unseen, and how and what we don't know, but for sure there's the spiritual entities that can affect the human body and that can enter the human body and can manage the human body and cause so many problems, right? And we've seen this even in modern day. Even within modern psychology, they have a column there for unexplained supernatural, things, right? Where they cannot
Right.
explain it, they put in that column. And there's been so many documentaries and so many from all non-Islamic sources.
Yeah. In
The
fact,
bottom line is,
in fact, if you go back like a few centuries back, all over the world, every culture accepts the existence of this entity, unless until modernism comes out, and it kind of tries to say that no, only we know the human being is just a body, not a soul or a mind, etc. Even though they have debates on it, but completely
exactly,
trying to reject that. But now it's coming up again, and in the form of many other ways. But then one thing important comes to my mind is that hadith, which we know is that every human being has a kareen, like every human being has uh, one jinn assigned or one devil assigned to them since birth.
right,
So we know that everyone, even us, we've been assigned one person, and he's constantly working 24/7 to delude us or to get us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, modern day people would dismiss it. Oh, what do you mean jinn? Because the way things have been constructed around, again, how we've been educated, that jinn links to Disney, Aladdin, Genie in the Lamp. It's a story, it's a cartoon. What a ridiculous thing. But no, these are true. These are actually true. And again, when people believe that it's just a story or cartoon, they dismiss it. Therefore, they're not able to target the problem. And then the problem goes untreated, unsolved. They look for other measures to take, other cures that don't work. Therefore, they suffered their whole life. So the ruqya is a spiritual cure. And there's also a physical component to it, such as, for example, using the wudu water of someone when they give you ayn and hasad. A lot of people might make fun of that, but if you look at the way the body works, that's the physical component. Now, someone could say, no, you just recite something and that's it. No, the Prophet ﷺ specifically told us that you need to take that water. Now, there's a lot of electrodes, a lot of discharge that comes from someone when they use water on their skin, and that's captured in the water. Now, that other person has to wash themselves with it. I think this needs some deeper study, but what I can say is definitely there's a very deep insight into that. The concept of the ayn, right? The
Mm,
photons and the way energy enters and is interpreted by the eye. When someone looks at someone with envy, it's a negative energy, as opposed to
yeah,
when someone looks at someone with love, for example, or care. You can feel that exchange of
right.
pheromones, um,
In fact,
connection.
if one spiritual master, Ibn al-Qayyum al-Jawzi, I think he was the one who mentioned that, it's like, uh, ayn is like an arrow from that hits one soul to another soul, something along the lines. He said that.
100%. And which is, I was talking to an engineer recently who's working, I cannot disclose exactly what he's working, but he's working in the defense ministry in one of the countries. And he was saying how they people use broadcasting, television, and social media to actually propagate ayn and to hurt people. And people are like, oh, what is this? A modern day sihr? Well, yes, because if you think about it, it's the same concept. You're looking at a screen, energy enters your eyes, it interprets, it transforms it, it analyzes it, it connects in, it influences you. But it goes both ways. Sometimes we don't understand that the same way we're transmitting from our eyes, we're also receiving from our eyes. The same way we're transmitting from our body, we're receiving from our body. Understood? So I do believe that if people were to put aside their biases and their ridicule when they hear some of these things and actually look into it from all kinds of perspective, the secular, the intellectual, the scientific, spiritual, I believe that they would discover that Islam is the solution for the modern day depression and sadness. Every time I see
Right.
something, I always come to this conclusion: Islam would solve this problem. Islam would
Right.
solve gambling. Islam would solve addiction. Islam would solve ethical problems. Islam would solve marriage issues. Islam would solve
Depression.
sexual issues. Islam would solve poverty and hunger and everything. Islam has a
Right.
solution for everything. People just need to give it a chance. The modern day paradigm has failed us miserably. Look at Islam. Islam will solve your sadness, depression, anxiety as a cure for everything. 100%.
So one thing I like, want you to get into, which is, so now we, okay, acknowledge that there are many more entities, realities which the modern paradigm is not addressing. Now, if you come back to these mental issues or problems, I generally have to deal with people who have doubts. They come, like, they go through a lot of doubts, and then what I find is generally a core, like, something that is generally seen in them is many of them are actually having symptoms of OCD. And then when we try to see a comparison in the Islamic tradition, OCD is very similar to something known as Waswas. So do you see there's a connection there between Waswas and OCD?
Yes, 100%. I believe that they're almost interchangeable. They're almost the same thing. Because if you look at OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, it starts with an obsession. It starts with
Right.
something mental. And waswasa, what is waswasa? It's an intrusive thought. Now, the origins of
Mm,
that, that's the difference between the two paradigms, the modern and the Islamic. In Islam, that obsession comes from shaytan. Even though many, sadly, many imams dismiss it now, and even when community members go to them, they'll say, go to the psychiatrist, at least do some rukia, man. At least give him some spiritual advice. No, no, they just say, no, this is a medical thing. I don't want nothing to do with it. Sadly, it's a shame. But Islamically, the intrusive thoughts, the waswasa, comes from shaitan. Yes, the nafs can also, to waswisu bihi nafsu. The nafs can also make waswas, 100%. But you have to understand that, as you said, the qareen is there. He studies you from the time you were born. He knows exactly.
right.
And he's constant, 24 hours, no break. His main objective is to try to misguide you. So imagine he's even now, he's with me, he's with you. He's
Mm,
seeing what we're doing right now.
mm,
Probably he's planning something to throw in some issues maybe later on to cause some doubts, some problems. Oh, this brother did this. Oh, he said that. What do you mean by that? Oh, he was sneezing in the thing. Oh, why this? Why that? Right? It's like he's so smart. He's looking right now. He's hearing us. Okay, he knows exactly what we're doing. Oh, how can I mess their dawah? I wonder if I can start something. Why is this brother? Oh, why we delayed this broadcast? So we could have done it earlier. He's just always looking at different ways. That's his main objective. Problem is, most people don't care. They don't think about it this way,
Right.
right? So that obsessive, compulsive behavior is connected to those intrusive thoughts that someone cannot control. I would say it is shaitan's weapon of choice today, OCD. It can be from whatever. Start with tahara, because that's the easiest thing. Why? Because it's linked to our daily salah,
Right.
something that you have to do every day. So shaitan looked at it and says, okay, what can I target them with right now that can really, really get them going? Well, people might say, yeah, but why wasn't it a problem before? I'll tell you why. Because the lifestyle before, they didn't have this fancy, very easy, very clean lifestyle. They were in the desert, right? Shaitan, they couldn't play. They're like, that's all the water that we have. We make tayammum, whatever. That's what it is. We pray. Today, you got water, tissue paper, toilet paper, wet
Yeah.
wipes, hand sanitizer, you name it. Okay. You got all kinds of stuff. So now it's like too much. So Shaitan said, aha, these guys are really, really, let me hit it. So now you got
Yeah.
all these things, showers, people get in the shower, yet still they doubt whether they have wudu. So Shaitan hit him. Why? To delay the prayer. Now they doubt the prayer. Oh, now did I pray 2 rakas, 3 rakas, but do I have wudu? Oh my God, is my prayer accepted? Did I commit kufr because I pray without wudu? What if I miss the prayer? Oh, is it intentional? I committed kufr. So he wants to push them to his final objective, which is what Allah tells in the Quran. The final objective is to misguide people to kufr. Okay, that's a promise that shaitan has made. So you find within a waswasa and intrusive thoughts and OCD, it starts with something. Mostly, usually it's tahara. Okay, cleanliness. It could be other stuff. Sometimes it's like a thought. For example, I was dealing with some brothers who had issues with uh, certain terminology in Islam or certain names or certain things that they've seen, and it becomes an obsessive thought. Then it moves to like salah, to kufr.
Right.
Oh, does Allah exist? Do I disbelieve?
Yeah.
That is He made takfir? What if I smile when I heard a hadith? That I just make kufr?
And
Slowly,
then
slowly,
yeah,
and it
there's
moves.
one like I come across many people which is like, am I a Muslim? I don't think I'm a Muslim. Even though okay, you affirm that
Right.
Allah exists, you affirm that Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the last and final Messenger. But still they have this doubt and this keeps on going. And in fact, I have been
Exactly.
a victim myself. I have gone through this OCD of wuzu and tahara.
And
And
the funny thing is that when you talk to people who don't practice Islam that much, they don't have this problem.
right.
Right? Most people say, when I was not really practicing, just praying Juma here and there, I never thought about this. But now, and I started practice and try to do it now, these issues
Ex-
start coming. SubhanAllah. Right? So you see how
Exactly.
shaitan's playing.
Exactly. And if I go back to my story also, when I actually took this initiative to be more practicing and, incorporating Islam fully in my life, that is when I actually started getting these things. In fact, many people, other people that I speak to, many revered brothers and sisters I speak to, they tell me the same thing that when they actually start practicing, this is when they go through. And when I was going through some equivalent of if there is something in psychology that is addressing it, I think they were calling it OCD of scrupulosity or something, but I don't think they were actually properly addressing the issue. So this is something rampant. I come across many people going through this.
Right. So I believe, again, to answer your question, just because I need to make a move.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a huge correlation. I believe that people need to understand Islamically how to get rid of OCD, how the Prophet ﷺ addressed waswasa. And one of the best things you can do is, as the Prophet ﷺ said in his hadith about who created this, who created this, who created this, and then who created Allah, right? Those intrusive thoughts that were coming and keep questioning. The Prophet ﷺ said, just desist. And really, what we call ERP, or exposure response prevention, just ignoring the stimuli, just trying to, okay, you're exposed to something, they just prevent the response, the going into things. This is the best, the most, let's say, rewarding thing that I've had with my clients, is to work on this, to just work on ignoring and just diminishing these stimuli, and you find great results where people change their life having suffered with waswasa and OCD for years. We find that they change their lives within, mashallah, weeks. So this is definitely very effective. This is, again, when you look at the Islamic paradigm of counseling, it's not like, I make something up, I came up with this new thing and it's a new way, positive Islamic psychology is my way and it's secret, it's esoteric. No, this is sunnah. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? How did he deal with these things? As he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that I left nothing unaddressed. I addressed everything that will bring you closer to Allah or keep you away from hellfire.
Right.
Yeah.
And just one last thing that comes to my mind, because I went through this, is what I go through is it feels like what shaitan does is it tries to address our innate fears, and everyone has very different innate fears or insecurities, and shaitan tries to trigger those insecurities within us. And if we try to pay more attention, more energy to those fears, sometimes these are just fears. Even if you address it intellectually, you've answered the valid question, the innate fear still is there. And when shaitan tries to trigger that again and again, if you give it more energy, if you give it more thought, what ends up happening is it starts to become some kind of a feeling, not just a thought but a feeling. And in OCD, many people, when we explain it to them that it's just a thought, ignore them, they don't understand that it's not just a thought but also a feeling that you have, that you haven't done it properly, and that is connected to your fear. And if you have to not just ignore the thought but ignore the feeling as well, that okay, that feeling can be wrong, the judgment that you're getting from within is a wrong judgment or wrong assessment about you've done it or you have not done it properly. And when people actually start ignoring that feeling, this kind of CBT actually helps them a lot. It helped me a lot. And it starts the more what we do is, generally when we go through OCDs, this obsession, and this obsession, it brings in some kind of anxiety within us, okay, I've not done wuzu properly, what if I'm a Muslim or not? And to eradicate this anxiety, we do some kind of a compulsion. But this compulsion actually might in short term might make us feel that okay, it's relieving me from that anxiety, but in the long run is actually making the obsession come even more and more and more.
That's true.
And then the best way is actually to be okay with that kind of anxiety you get in, and not indulge in any kind of compulsion, or you're just going to make the obsession stronger in the long run.
100%. Mashallah. Barakallah fik, akhi. Jazakallah khair. I do have to make a move. It was a pleasure talking to you. Hope it's beneficial.
Coming. I think there was so many insight that you gave us, and there's a lot for our viewers to look at and address. And then I will link many other articles and etc. In fact, your own website, people should go through. I think you have a complete course on OCD and Waswas.
Yes.
So I'm going to link that in the description below. Inshallah, I would recommend people to go through your course, and also your course on masculinity, because I have someone who's taken your course, and it was something very helpful. So please subscribe to Gabriel Al Romaani's channel and also go through his courses. They are very, very helpful. Trust me.
Barakallah fik.
Jazakallah khairan for coming. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.